I'm Zach Weiss, co-founder of Worn and Wound, and this is the 2020 Virtual Windup Watch Fair. Ophion Watches is a small, independent brand out of Spain producing watches with movements and finishing that far exceed their price tags. I recently sat down with the brand's founder, Miguel Morales, to learn more about how he's able to offer such exceptional finishing at more than fair prices. Here's our interview with Miguel. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Virtual Windup Watch Fair. Today, I am joined by Miguel Morales of Ophion Watches. Miguel, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. It's really privileged to work with you. So thank you very much. I'm Miguel Morales. I'm the founder of Ophion Watches.
Excellent. It's great to have you here, Miguel. You and I actually go back several years. We've known each other for a while, so I'm very excited to see you again virtually and to talk to you in this context about Ophion watches. So maybe you could tell our viewers a little bit about Ophion, the brand itself, why you started it, and what the philosophy of the brand is.
So Ophion goes back to where I was studying architecture in the university. I met my partner there. It was Virtual Windup. So when we were like late night working and all that, we always were talking to create a watch brand. And I have this idea that because all my life I saw these like high-end watches that I always compare to a painting, like in a museum. Like you go to a museum, you see the painting, but you can only enjoy it for a little while, and you have to go home and you cannot own it. So these watches that I saw, like very high-end, it was always something like that. That it was so frustrating to have it out of my reach. So yeah, that was the initial idea of the brand. So when we finished our studies, we decided to create the brand, and we get with some friends, and yeah, we launched the company in 2014. So the first year was to learn about the industry and to get the feeling on to search the right suppliers, because it was very difficult from being an outsider to find the right suppliers. So the idea of the brand is bringing this charm and characteristic from high-end watches to a very affordable price. So to try to show why it's so special, the high-end watches, and that everybody can enjoy it.
Excellent. And in order to kind of achieve that, I mean, you've done some really interesting things with manufacturing and with movement sourcing. And I recall with your very first watch, one of the standout features was the movement you used. Can you talk a little about why you decided to go with this unique 5-day movement, and what else you've kind of done in that arena?
The idea with our movement is always like to create the same language aesthetic as the watch, because usually when you see watches like in the medium range price, like you have a watch designed from someone and a movement designed from another people in a very different time, so they don't match together. So it's like it has a very big disconnection between the design of the watch and the design of the movement. So our idea was to always create and design the watch and the movement as a whole. So we have like if we have a watch like the 960 that is inspired in the 1960s era, we have the movement design with the same aesthetic. So we always match both. Like in our second model, the 6786, we have or we redesigned completely the movement, and we did a symmetrical geometry on the bridges to evoke the pocket watches in where the watch is inspired. So that's always the idea, like to have both elements combined in the same aesthetic language. That's why we always try to match everything and create one unique piece and not two different elements joined together. Because sometimes, like, you can have very nice movement, like from high-end watches with cut de Janeiro or chamfering in the edges, like very nice, but it's not completely similar to the language of aesthetical language of the watch. So it's like always disconnected designs. there are of course some exception, and there are all people that do that, but we always want to match the movement with the design of the watch.
That's very interesting, and is very clear, particularly on the most recent models. When you look through the case back, the ornate and kind of uh, vintage style of that movement is really quite exceptional. You also chose some really interesting finishing for that movement that I think speaks to your process and philosophy as a whole. So that mixes both machine and hand finishing. Is that correct?
Yeah, because we always try to find like the this idea that I was talking before about the high-end watchmaking. So to bring this kind of characteristic to a more affordable price, we had to find like different ways of producing things. So some things are doing by hand, some things are doing by machine. So we can find the best balance and to offering the best price. Because for example in this movement the decoration of on the bridges is evoking the all pocket watches decoration, in where the evaporation of mercury leave like a frosting texture. So we do this with hand hammering finish that evoke this kind of decoration from the all pocket watches, like because the watch is inspired by all pocket watches, so the movement is inspired by all pocket watches, and we have like a very clear symmetry that usually in modern movement you don't see, but with the twin barrels we could get this very symmetrical design that I think is very appealing.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. While we're on the topic of finishing and manufacturing techniques, with your most recent watch, the Velos 786, you employed some really interesting dial manufacturing techniques, which include a type of CNC machining. Can you talk a little bit about that and the process to kind of create that type of dial?
Yeah, of course. Like this comes again with the when the idea was when we were thinking about the brand, because long before we created the brand I always was looking for a like very nice guillotine dial, because I always love guillotine dials. So to get a really nice guillotine dial is this technique is done by a machine that is called Rose Jean, that this is manual operated but is done by a machine. So this machine create very small cuts on the surface of the dial, like so you have when you make the machine makes the cut you have like a shiny groove. So you have well, not million but hundreds of of small grooves that reflects the light, because when you cut you make a small polish groove, and this polish groove will reflect the light in a very different way. So when I was looking for like this good amazing Guillo's dial, all that I see was stamping Guillo's dial, because that's the cheapest way to do the Guillos. That you have like a pressing dies that make a very fast movement on the dial, and you get like you have a geometry, but this geometry is made by deformation. It's not made by cutting. So the reflection that you will get is much more different from a Guillo's cut dial than a press or stamp dial, because in the in the stamped you have a matte surface, and in the guillos and the cut guillos you have a shiny surface. Trying to get this amazing surface, we went with the CNC machine cut. Like it's the same, it's similar cutting, but it's done by a machine instead of a machine operated by hand.
That's very interesting, and I've seen a graphic of this difference, and it makes a lot of sense. The ridges and the valleys are much less sharp.
Yeah, you get two results, because with the stamping you have a deformation, so you have a less sharp geometry and matte surface, and with the cutting guillos you have very sharp geometry, but also you have that shiny bevel that the cat leaves when it moves. So that's you have
Mm.
both. So that's why it's so different, the result that you get with one thing and the other, and in things in one, and you will think that is the same thing, but just in a small different way of doing the technique, you get very different results.
Yeah, and I'm actually wearing one of your watches right now, and I can tell you the result is very excellent. Um, does the CNC machining also take a lot longer?
It doesn't take the same as like with a hand operate machine, but with the CNC machine, you have 2 hours of CNC machining for each dial. So for each dial, 2 hours is also a pretty long time just to mill
Mhm.
the pattern.
So, how do you balance then this higher level of finishing with approachable pricing?
From the beginning, we have two very clear ideas on mind because we wanted to offer the best quality possible at the most affordable price. So we went with two key elements. One is the online distribution that, of course, you cut all the middle percentage, so you can offer a very low price, and you have the contact directly with the client, and also like finding the right suppliers, because the that year that we had studying the industry and finding the right supplier, at first we always found like one guy or one company that do the complete watch. The problem with that is that you don't have control of the quality of each element. So for example, you say, oh, here's my design, and they say, oh great, we will produce, and they send you a watch, and when you see the watch, you see, like, for example, oh, I don't like the hands, and you say to them, what happened, these hands are not good enough, and they say, oh, I'm sorry, that's the only hand that we can produce. So
Mhm.
maybe it was much more difficult at first to do each part of the watch with different suppliers, but that allow us to have the control over the quality of each part. And also it's like you find what is possible or what is not possible to do, because if you do again the same, you bring your design to to this guy or this company that is going to do the complete watch. They say, if they see that it's very difficult to produce, or it takes a lot of effort, they say, oh, it's not possible to do. So when you take only that part and go to different suppliers, and they say, oh yes, this is possible or this is not possible, you can get a much more original, like true to your original idea, because you bring what you want and you control all the parts on the production and on the quality. So I think mixing that those two elements, like the online distributor and trying to make all the parts with different suppliers, with the best suppliers, and mixing ourselves together. It was a very big challenge, but it would allow us to offer something really different, I think.
Very much so. And speaking to your suppliers, one of the other really interesting aspects of your most recent watches is that you worked with Kari Voutilainen's case manufacturer, which is a truly exceptional high-end manufacturer. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
For our Velos, the last watch, we wanted to have a very strong article case. So for that, we went with the teardrop lax. So the problem with this, or the beauty of this lax, is that you have to, for that particular geometry, you had to produce the lux separate from the middle part of the case. So you produce the middle part and each lug individually. And when you have the each lug individually produced, you have to invisible weld it to the case. So you need a very high skill set to have that invisible weld. So we were looking for the best way to produce. So we went with one of the best, and it was amazing to have the opportunity to work in this with this company, and they produce a very amazing final result. So we are very happy.
So Miguel, with a slow CNC dial, a case produced by Kari Voutilainen, a movement with a 5-day power reserve and decoration to look like an old pocket watch, what do your most recent watches actually cost?
So for the highest level of the guillos, because we have two dials, the guillos and the radial finish that is less expensive to produce. So for
Mhm.
the highest Guillo's produced dial is 3,500 approximately US dollars. So with that's
Okay.
included in the shipping. So around that you can get the last watch. So I think it's like a very good bargain because if you consider everything that is involved, it's like a very low price.
Absolutely, the quality of the case is a real standout, and I think anyone who appreciates finishing and that level of craft will really be able to understand that in person. And I think in photos we can only show so much, but highly recommend people check out your watches in person when they can. Hopefully at the next physical wind up watch fair.
That would be great.
Miguel, I think it's a pretty good point to kind of wrap up. Is there anything else you'd like to add or tell us about some of your plans in the future?
So our plans is always like keep going with this direction of trying to bring what it makes so special the watch world, like the high-end watchmaking, because you have all these people that really love these watches, but they can never own it or they can never experience. So bringing that beautiful charm to a wider audience, I think is like what we will try to do, and yeah, we will keep getting better and better and better because each time you find something in where you can improve, so to make a better product.
Excellent. Well, that's a very good goal to have. And thank you once again for joining us at the Virtual Wind Up Watch Fair, Miguel.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you very much. And I also have to say that you were one of the first to support us. So a lot of our success is thanks to you. So thank you very much for everything.
Oh, our pleasure. Our pleasure. All right. Thank you. Goodbye.